Hari Om and humble salutations. Welcome to Sadhana, the Inward Path, this Sunday morning. We have some very interesting offerings on the program today, with a feature on Shan Pillay from Pietermaritzburg and another on the Chinmaya Mission in Cape Town. Then there's more conscious cooking with Anuradha, yoga for wellness with Kugan, and Lokeshji enlightens our spirit with the Ramayan. Veteran photojournalist Shan Pillay is a familiar face in Pietermaritzburg's social and political circles. He was one of the last journalists to photograph former President Nelson Mandela before his incarceration in 1962. Shan Pillay is also a proud promoter of the Tamil language and was conferred with an honorary doctorate from the International Tamil University in Maryland, USA. We met the 82-year-old recently and were astounded by his ever-youthful presence.
I was 15-year-old when I had to forcibly start work. And I worked at a shoe factory called Sandals, which was part of Edel's shoe factory. And then over the years, I, of my own initiative, started progressing in the shoe factory. And eventually I started work for Jaguar Shoes, which employed about 1,500 people, and we used to make 12,000 pairs of shoes a day. I was general manager of that factory before becoming production director. And I spent 31 years in that factory, and eventually in 1994, I thought it was time that, since I have only shoes in my veins than blood, I started my own little CMT operation in which you make uppers for the bigger factories. In the old days, you know, when major papers existed in Durban, Maritzburg was non-existent because they didn't cover Maritzburg, and I felt Maritzburg was missing out, and I said I should go out there and put Maritzburg on the map. And what I did was to go around in my own time, in the weekends or after hours, and pick up tidbits of news, submit it to the daily and weekly newspapers. And over the years, there was a Mr. Stan Eldridge, the editor, Stan Horning, a sub-editor, and Ronnie Moon, another sub-editor, who nurtured me and gave me every support and built me up. And eventually, the Witness ran a column in which I used to write Indian, African, and colored news, my own column. In 1961, All in Africa conference, in which, or at which, 1,400 delegates from all over Africa attended. And the conference was supposed to be held at the YMCA hall. And somebody said, you know, the YMCA hall is bugged. And somebody contacted the Plesala Arya Samaj officials, of which Mr. Dasarath Bandhu, an activist in his own right, was the secretary. And he had agreed, it was Ram Navami celebrations that night, and he had agreed to give the hall for the conference, together with a senior reporter from the Daily News, who was at that time Krina Bond and later became Krina Alcock. we both got a front seat in the hall. A little while later, somebody whispered and said, "Hey, you know what? I think Mr. Mandela is going to be here tonight. And I think he's at Dr. Sililo's place in New Scotland Road." So I told my friend, she had a car, and we rushed to this New Scotland Road. And when we got there, it was seething with special branch, police, and everybody else. But there was no Mr. Mandela. So we decided to get back to the hall. And when we got back to the hall, we couldn't get in, because imagine 1,400 delegates besides the locals, and the hall only held 400 people. I went around the back of the hall, and there was a window open. So I pushed my friend up through the window, and she pulled me in. And when we got inside, everybody started clapping, because they thought we were part of the contingent from Johannesburg. And we got a rousing welcome, applause. Just after midnight, here was this burly figure, bearded figure, who was Nelson Mandela. And he made a demand that there should be nothing less for a democratic South Africa than a one man, one vote. Mandela was a banned person, and at midnight his band would have been unbanned. But then when he finished his talk that night, he had to slowly escape, because at 6 o'clock in the morning you could be banned again. And what excuse to get away. There was somebody in the crowd that got the fits, epilepsy, and everybody, including the special branch, went to help him. And when they calmed him down, they later found that was just a hoax, because it allowed Mandela to slowly get out, and he was gone. In 1999, he was accorded the freedom of Pietermaritzburg, freedom of the city of Pietermaritzburg. And somebody, I think it was Mr. Rob Haswell, who was on the city council then, who remembered that I was one that was there that night for the conference. And I was invited by the organizers to share my experience of that historic night with President Mandela himself. I found him to be a warm and a calm individual.